We'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining the November Icon Call. My name is Tori Colburn. I am the Midwest Conservation Agronomist with American Farmland Trust. Appreciate everybody being here this morning. We hopefully have a good presentation for you this morning. We're excited to have everybody with us. So I think we'll get right into it here. But as we get started, I just ask everybody to please take a moment to drop in the chat. Please give us your name, your organization, your location, and I think we'll go ahead and get our opening poll launched. Helen, if I think you're in charge of that. And I just want to remind everybody that this call will be recorded so that if you want to go back and review any portion of today's call, you'll be able to do that. Or if you want to share it with anyone in your network, you're free to do so as well. So that will be on our YouTube page following this call. Usually within a day or two, we'll have that up and running. So please take a moment to take our entry poll, and we will go ahead and get started. All right. Hopefully this will be a good educational presentation for everybody. All right, a quick run through of our agenda. So we have a presentation lined up by Ben Reinhart and Isaac Ferrie on the ROI of conservation drainage, and then we will have an open group Q&A session at the end, and then we'll open it up to folks on the call for some news from around the network, any events or upcoming items that you'd like to share with the group. And then we do have a slide with CEU availability at the end. So if you want to stick around through the whole call, we will have CEUs at the end. As always, we want to extend a big thank you to Compeer Financial for helping to sponsor these Icon calls. We appreciate their support, and we look forward to continuing to work with them in the future. So as I said, today's speakers are Ben Reinhart of the Ecosystems Exchange and Isaac Ferrie of CropTech Consulting. Gentlemen, I think I'll go ahead and just pass it to you guys, let you give a quick introduction. And Isaac, I believe you're up first for speaking. So why don't I just pass it to you guys and we will get started with our presentation this morning.
Sure thing. So yeah, I'm Isaac Ferrie with CropTech Consulting. We're a crop consulting company located in central Illinois, deal mostly in the Midwest, but we do soil testing, fertility recommendations, and then consult on just about any aspect of farming that our customers have questions on, which puts us into a lot of different areas of research projects. One of those that I'll talk about today is conservation drainage and tile gates.
Yeah, Ben Reinhart, conservation planner with Ecosystem Services Exchange. We're a technical service company that does a lot of work with the edge of field conservation drainage practices, buffers, drainage water management, bioreactors, phosphorus removal structures, and such. We're in NRCS TSP certified in pretty much most of the Midwest states. And so we work with folks like Isaac, individual landowners, agencies to kind of develop and deliver some of these conservation drainage programs to kind of scale out adoption and get these practices designed and installed. So I'll follow up on Isaac's presentation real quick on a program that we got going on in Central.
Share my screen real quick and go through a project we've been working with tile drainage and conservation tile drainage and some of the things that we've seen through different management practices. So this was a huge conjunction with McLaughlin Dooley Farms out of Leroy, Illinois. Have been with us since 1999, helping us analyze this data, put it on their own ground. Big time commitment to them. But originally, this plot started as a tile spacing plot. So we put the mains there with the trencher, the rest went in with the farmer plow. And we have actually 380s, but 280s you can see in the picture with the drainage ditch that kind of tees in between them. And so we did runs with 120-foot spacing, 60-foot spacing, 30-foot spacing. We left a gap that probably should have been bigger as we got further into the trial, and repeated it on both 80s. So it started out as a tile spacing plot in 1999 into 2000 when we installed it. And we kind of managed it that way. We looked at yield differences that way to see what soil types and spacings work best. But each of these blocks has their own main and their own outlet into this drainage ditch. So the tile depth does vary slightly between the spacings based on contractor recommendations and the actual spacing that we have. So our larger spacings are slightly deeper. But for the first 12 years, we looked at yield, comparing yield of the different spacings. One of the things that did is it gave us a very good baseline differences in yield between the two 80s of land here. So then later on, we actually gated all of the systems on this west 80 and compared to the east 80, realizing those differences that were stated before. So in 2013, we installed the actual structures on each of the 6 spacings on the west 80. Our primary focus throughout this whole plot is from the spacing to the gates has always been on yield. So that's what we've been after the most is economically what's it going to mean for our farmers. But we have done sporadic nutrient testing, looking at overall water quality and nutrient loss along the way. Then in May of 22, within these gates, we did install the smart drainage system. So now we can start to look at these remotely. So before we had to manually change the gates and the structures, change the levels. And then now we can not only remotely monitor where the water is, but we can remotely change the height that we want the gates to be at or when we want to let water go, which the management style makes it much easier. And that's probably one of the big barriers to entry with some of our clients is the time constraint. How do I manage the water, and then what is the time constraint? So obviously being able to remotely see it where the water is much preferred over our old approach of having to go in and measure down to see where that water table is and then make adjustments on the fly. So like I said, each spacing has its own main, its own outlet. And the big caveat here is as we go through the results, the drainage ditch is close. So each of these has its own outlet. We have adequate drainage. It's all sized very well. So when we want to let water go, we can. We don't get backed up very often. We have good outlets. So that lessens some of the risk of holding too much water back, that when we decide to let it go, we can get rid of the water pretty quick. So as we go through results, it may vary on how you would have to control these structures if your outlet is undersized or you can't get the water away as fast, I guess, as we can here. So like I said, close outlets, we have the drainage ditch teeing through there with adequate supply, and we'll test the drainage from time to time. So one of the things with the technologically based approach is being able to remotely watch that water level in the box. And then how we manage is you have a set point that you set. You can set it at different points throughout the season. So like this clip away, it's set at 6 inches below the surface. And basically it's saying if it gets an inch above that set point for 120 hours, then we're going to open the gate. And this is a pretty strict one. This would be more towards our later season how we'd use it, but you can set these however you want, and then that way before with manual gates we were either waiting till after a big rain and then realizing we had to let some water go because it rained more than we thought, and then sometimes depending on where your gates were, it's hard to get to them to get them open if you didn't plan accordingly, or you're anticipating a rainfall and you let water or you raise gates in anticipation of a rainfall, and then sometimes that rain would never happen. So that was always a tricky place to be in. It allows us to be more reactive, allow what actually happens and then react to it, so we don't have to let water go that we don't need to, and it's pretty responsive. So it takes a lot of the guesswork out of doing that. A lot of the worry on our part, our biggest fear, and all farmers fear, they know the benefit of tile, and now you're talking about stopping the tile or gating it. So I know the tile's giving me a benefit. Our farmers are very worried about doing anything that's going to undo the benefit of the tile out there, and this removes some of that work. And so you can kind of see here are a couple rain events. If I can actually show where you can see the rain event. We bring the water up in the box. Our set point right now is up here, and you'll see that water start to recede a little bit. We get another rain event. It doesn't get to our set point. So we never open the box in this scenario. Had we gotten more and got above this purple line, it would have. But then this water is going back into the soil or leaking out the system. We realize too that with the drainage ditches running through the farm, it is a fairly leaky system. But that's what we have to deal with. So here you can kind of see the water in the box. June 3rd, we were dry coming up into that. This is a 2-inch rain event that still didn't get us above our set point. So we didn't let anyone go. In our previous system, we would have lowered our blocks if we were anticipating this big rain, and we would have let some of this water run out the tile. This tells you we didn't let any run out the tile, but it all absorbed back into the system, followed by another 7/10 rain a few days later. So just for I guess our peace of mind, being able to watch that remotely and then make those adjustments, because our biggest thing in tile gates is letting too much water go too early, because we don't get it back. And so not only in the box, but we have soil moisture sensors out there, different amounts each year depending on what we're really wanting to key in on. But these Centec moisture sensors have sensors here every 4 to 6 inches all the way down through. We've used those in the past and use them continually. And then we do have a Grow Guru, a couple of those sensors that are completely buried. The oldest ones I think are going now 5 years buried, and they're still reporting, which is pretty amazing. The only downfall to these is we do start recording at about 19 inches because we want to be below tillage depth on where we buried them, so we're not hitting them. So we have to add an auxiliary sensor to get that surface sometimes. But if we look at here, this 2-inch sensor depth, one of the things that we can see here is plant usage. This drawdown during the day, levels off at night, draws down during the day. So we're in the root zone here watching overall plant usage. We can see it here, we draw down, and then we actually get a slight rebound at night as that water comes up and draw down. So we can see the plant usage. We know where the plant is using water with the sensors, which is kind of nice. We can actually measure that plant usage through the water sensors to figure out on average what we were losing each of those days, how much water we actually need, which is helpful in irrigation, but also nice to make comparisons on our gated versus non-gated, how much water they have available to them. So here's a snippet from our soil sensors, our buried soil sensor from 2024. Couple things we just wanted to point out that we noticed along the way. Here you can actually see this is on the gated side where we're holding water back. We have root activity down in that 3rd and 4th foot of depth. And this is middle of July. When we go to the gated side, those sensor levels at the gated side show hardly any to no root activity at that depth. So we are taking water up at that depth where we're not in the gated side. So root activity is deeper during this dry spell. At the 55-inch, no activity, and we're actually getting into root activity down here lower. So we typically see this. We see deeper root activity where we gated. We're getting penetration of roots and water uptake. And the other thing you'll notice here is these are rain events. So anytime we're above this blue line is about 1 inch. Realize that this sensor is buried, so the first reading we're getting is 19 inches. These rain events are not showing up on this sensor. We're soaking it up in that first 19 inches. But the problem some here is in our non-gated side that is drier, our cracks and preferential flow we've noticed become increasing. It's a big increasing deficit. So a lot of times it'll take 2 or 3 rains before we actually swell enough to close those cracks. And that's kind of what it shows here is these cracks. So we have a big rain event. We are getting water spikes down to that 31, 39-inch level, almost at the same rate that we're seeing it at the surface. So our preferential flow of water down to tile depth is very fast, very quick. And then you see a little bit of delay as we go, a little bit more wetting, and a little bit more separation, but it gets better out here. But that's the biggest thing we're trying to correct. Our tile gates, we're we're holding water back in the spring, but in reality, once we get through spring, that water's gone. Like, we're not holding it late into the season. Our biggest benefit, we believe, from the tile gates is mid to late season rains that we stop from leaving, that were going through the soil with preferential flow way too fast. And we allow them to soak back in. And you can just see a little bit here where we zoom in on it as we're seeing the spike at 23 inches, at the same time we're seeing that spike at 31 inches. And so here's what we're seeing. We kind of relate it to a sponge. So if you have a rock hard sponge and you dip it into a bucket of water and pull it out really quick, you don't pick up much water. But if you dip it in the bucket and you let it sit there for a while and you pull out, it can be, full of water. And that's essentially late season, mid to late season. That's what we're trying to do at the gate. So you can see here, we're getting to the end of June, into July, we're starting to get dry. We're trying to, the rain event happens, it can hit the gates, it can back up. We're not letting it go for a specific amount of time, with the hopes that, like soaking that sponge, that soil starts to absorb that water back in and we don't let it go. And that's the most important on that biggest flush and really dry dirt. So we get a big rain with big cracks, it's going to get to the tile quick and it leaves. And so all of a sudden we have a big rain event that we didn't get much benefit from because it got to the tile too quickly. And that's what our sensors were showing. We were getting down to 24 easily, but 39, 40 inches of depth with that water so quickly after the rain event. And we noticed that on some catches later on too. But in this one right here, so this is the non-gated side, this is the gated side. Our first rain event here, there's barely a little bump on these overall moisture sensors on the average through there, where we see a pretty good spike on our overall moisture on that first rain event. Then we have a second rain event here. We see the spike, but here on that second rain event, we're already into what we would call our adequate soil moisture stage. And then a third rain event, a fourth rain event. Essentially, on our non-gated side, it took 4 rain events to get us into an adequate soil moisture position, where we did it in 2 on the gated side. And now we can let that water go. But if we don't get those 4 rain events, that's a problem. And that's anecdotally what we noticed is after a big rain event, our gated side, the cracks would swell and close up. And on our non-gated side, we'd have a big 7/10 inch of rain and those cracks would still be there. It would take multiple rains to do that. And these were big rain events. This first rain event was 1.8 inches, right? And then it followed up by a 3/10 of an inch rain here the second, and that's kind of that wetting perimeter. But overall, over this is 12 days, 12-day, 13-day period, it took 3.5 inches of rain on our non-gated side to equal the same soil moisture load that we got in 2 inches of rain on the gated side. So that's a huge benefit when we talk about being dry all year and we catch a 1-inch rain. Are we actually able to use all of that 1 inches, and how much of it is making it to the tile? So closing up cracks, slowing that water movement, giving the soil a chance to absorb the moisture is a huge part of it, and huge part for yield, but also reduces nutrient leaching. The faster that water moves through the soil, it seems like the more nitrate, even orthophosphorus that it carries. And so these are yield advantages to gates. This is just a 2024, but we do have 30, 60, 120 foot spacing. These are 2 soil types in the field. So we can see there is some correlation to soil type. There is some correlation to overall spacing. The way we manage it, our 30-foot spacings seem to do a little bit better, partly because we manage it to move water fast and hold on to it as long as possible. And our 30-foot spacings do a pretty good job of getting rid of water when we need to really fast. And this is just summary. We don't have the yields fully analyzed for this year yet, but this is just corn. You can look at the different spacings, 30, 60, or 120 foot. So we do have a slight advantage, but anywhere from 6 to 9 bushel over the last 5 to 6 years for an advantage on overall corn. So if we average all those spacings together for those years it was in corn, we're seeing just over a 7 bushel response to the tile gates on top of any response that we're already getting from adding the tile to the field. We look at beans the same way. Here we have beans through there. We're holding up just under a 4 bushel response to beans. So one of the things we push with our clientele when we look at overall costs of a whole tile system, adding tile drainage is not that big of an expense to be able to return another 4 bushel in beans, another 7 bushel in corn on average over the course of the study. But I think a lot of that comes from being able to recharge that water on those different rains later in the season. Slowing water down, closing up these cracks does decrease nutrient loss. So different times that we've done sporadic testing through to look at it. So here would be an example. We did flow catches at each one of the outlets before anticipated rain. We came back the next morning and we did flow catches, and then basically we did them every 24 hours over the next week. And one thing we can see is we checked it as 5 to 6 o'clock at night when we did our first flow. It was 8 a.m. the next morning when we did our next catch, and we got 1.6 inches of rain overnight. The tile hit peak flow very fast, which is another indicator of how quickly this water is getting down to the tile. It's kind of jumbled, but what you'll see here is all the red ones are the free-flowing tile, all the blue ones are the tile gates, depending on spacing affected flow. But our blue gated tile, and this was before automation, so we just had our manual gates. We are flowing less water over the top of the manual gates, holding more back, and that tile stopped flowing as soon as we got the excess water, whereas our free-flowing kept flowing days after that. But big peak, big draw, which kind of shows back to our system, our field. The water moves very quickly. We get to the outlets pretty quickly. When we look at nitrate results out here, they're about the same. But in here, like on our 120, not only are we flowing more water on our free-flowing tile, but the nitrate load in that water was higher than our lower flowing gated side. So on average there with our non-gated, we're losing 7.6 pounds of acre per day. Down here, because the flow is down, we're only losing about 0.25 pounds or a quarter of a pound of N per acre per day that it keeps flowing at this rate. But our big losses are coming in those first 2 days after the rain or that first flush where that water was moving through so quickly and you have so much of it. And so you can see, like in this, we looked at our different spacing. Our gated, we lost 153 pounds based on those flows versus 258. So this is kind of 14 pounds per acre versus 23. So we are, by gating the tile manually in this case, we are reducing our overall nutrient loss, nitrogen loss through there. But roughly a 40% reduction, which is really exciting. But also realizing that this 11-pound difference, unless this happens a lot through the year, economically for the farmer, that's not going to be enough to move the needle, right? So 40% is a big number. That's great. But if this is only happening once, twice, 3 times a year with these big rains, it's going to be hard to justify the costs on nutrient savings alone. But it does go back to, we looked at just the overall nitrate lost over that week of the rain. 70% of our loss, whether it was in the gated side or the non-gated side, we lost 70% of those nutrients in those first 2 days. So there's where I think even on the automated side, it's even better. Holding that water back for that initial flush of water and letting it soak in becomes insanely important. And then just wrapping up with for our farmers, it is about economics, always economics. So we have very nature conservative farmers that care about soil health, that care about soil tilth, conservation, everything else. But in the end, they do have to make money and feed their family, or they're not going to be there in the following year. So going back to the yield benefits is pretty important. Um, so if we want to increase conservation drainage, I think there's not one practice or implementation that's going to be widespread across everything. It's got to be adaptable, but you got to have something to incentivize the change. Unfortunately, in this case, saving 11 pounds of N is not enough to move that needle. But an increase of yield, a 7 bushel, a 9 bushel increase in yield would be. Then obviously government programs or we're probably headed that way is government regulation that's going to cause the implementation, I guess is another way to get it. But for our guys, over the last 4 years, well, four croppings of each one. So last 8 years, our corn average is 7.3 bushel, and we're almost as high as 10 on our narrow spacings. Soybean average at 4 bushel with some responses individual years at between 6 and 7. For a lot of our guys, that is enough to move the needle. For something that now with the automation side doesn't require a whole lot of legwork. And the best thing about the automation side is you can turn it over to other people. So we could manage it for our farmers if needed, if they put it in there, because we can do it remotely and we don't have to be at every field all the way through. But that's what most of our guys are starting to ask about. We just have to get the design, the implementation more readily. Most of our tile guys right now that install tile are booked a year plus in advance. So they're not trying to upsell anything. They got enough business to keep them going over the next 2 years. If we can make it easier to design and implement these to where they can turn it over to somebody else and then just install it, they're fine installing it, but the design and implementation and that sort of thing, they have so much going on. That's a hard hill to climb. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Ben.
Yeah, thanks, Isaac. I'm going to go ahead and share my slide. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about a program that we have in kind of East Central Illinois. And this kind of builds a little bit off what Isaac presented. You know, drainage water management is one of the few practices I think that we have in that kind of conservation toolbox to where we can get the water quality benefits that we're looking for from a conservation standpoint, but also have, you know, that extra kind of carrot there with the potential yield benefits. And so, you know, that's something that's really interesting about that program. But, you know, obviously there's other tools in that box that have been shown to be really effective from a water quality standpoint. So saturated buffers, denitrifying bioreactors. And so all of these practices really from a water quality standpoint have been well researched. You know, you're talking about decades and decades of research that have shown that these work in a variety of environments. They're highly effective from a water quality standpoint. And so we haven't yet seen, though, a lot of wide scale adoption in those practices. And so that's really what this program that ESE is kind of delivering there in Illinois is all about. Is to try to scale some of these practices up. And so this is with funding from National Association of Conservation Districts and National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and then also in partnership with the Ag Drainage Management Coalition and Illinois LICA. And we're focusing on kind of the 7-county area: DeWitt, Ford, Iroquois, Livingston, Macon, McLean, Piatt counties. And we're targeting 100 conservation drainage designs. And so this would be the drainage water management systems, saturated buffers, bioreactors, and all of these could either be manual or automated type of systems. Obviously, the automated systems kind of open up a few different avenues, particularly with drainage water management, as Isaac was kind of talking about, to where management can be a lot more effective. And so what this program covers. So ESE is a technical service provider in Illinois. And so this program covers the cost of planning and design for these systems. And so we offer turnkey services in the sense that an interested landowner can come to the table and contact us and say, hey, look, I'm interested to see if XYZ practice fits on my farm. So we do a remote site assessment, looking at topography, soils, the existing drainage system if one is there, and try to lay out some options for what practices are most likely to be suitable for any given field. From there, that moves forward into a formal design, an engineered design, and all of these designs that we do follow NRCS specs. So this would be I think it's DIA 164. So design and implementation activity is what the standard is now. It used to be CAP 30 for some of the drainage water management stuff, but now it's DIA 164, which is going to include a written set of plans, management schedules, engineering design drawings that'll basically be shovel ready. And so that's kind of the output from this program. And then from that point, we will support any participant that wants to move through, some of the more traditional conservation programs for implementation. This may be WIP, it might be other state level programs or something like that. And so our program covers the design. We'll help you try to take that design forward to make sure it gets built. We do have some incentives built into this program. One for drainage contractors, and so this is in partnership with Illinois land improvement contractors. There is a $800 incentive per design, per project or recommendation that leads to a design for anything that ILICA members bring forward to the table. And so if there's contractors out there that are working with a client and think they have a really good site, they can reach out to Ryan Arch there at ILICA and say, hey, look, I heard there's this program. Let's see if there's any potential there. And if that turns into a design, Illinois LICA through this program will pay them that $800 incentive payment. Likewise for landowners or producers, so the actual participants, we have $1,000 design incentive, and this is really meant to be kind of a seed money for the implementation, or at least that's our hope. And so a landowner or producer comes forward and they say, yes, we want to do this project. As soon as we have a completed design and it's approved, ESE would issue that $1,000 incentive payment to the landowner or producer. And so I will say with those, jumping back to the contractor ones, that's kind of a special side pot of money within this program here. And so that is a little bit more limited. I think it's the first 29 that come through the door for drainage contractors, whereas the landowner or producer payment, that's for all 100 designs. And so we do have dedicated funds to cover all that. So yeah, it's a pretty streamlined process, to the point that Isaac brought up. It is a challenge sometimes working quickly through these processes, particularly in traditional programs. And so that's where this program that we have gives us a little bit more flexibility to where we can be a little bit more timely in that design process. We can work with drainage contractors and try to meet them in the middle in terms of timelines and windows for getting these projects designed and installed. And so really it starts it starts with this no cost, no obligation site assessment. And so I have contact information down there for myself, Kate Schaefer, who's our conservation drainage coordinator, and then also Ryan Arch with Illinois Land Improvement Contractors. And so if you know of any folks that may be interested in getting one of these designs, this program covers 100% of the cost, and they just need to reach out, and we kind of see what opportunities we have there on that particular piece of ground. So I think I'll stop there and we can kind of open it up to questions, I believe.
Great. I'm going to be moderating the questions here. I'm MJ. I'm with the Edge of Field Working Group here at ISAP. I see that there's some that are in the chat already. So Isaac or Ben, you're welcome to answer. The first one we have came from Steve. Does optimum tile depth change with gated systems? Isaac, maybe you want to answer that one.
I mean, that's definitely not something we've directly studied. So I probably can't provide an exact. I know the way we manage water, when we finally decide to let it go, we want it to go. So usually shallower tile closer together gives you a better capacity right off the gate. But that's also assuming that you have a good outlet. So if your tile's draining it, it's getting away. I would imagine if you didn't have a good outlet, you would have to change the way you manage, and then maybe depth wouldn't play in as much. But Ben may be a better one to speak on that.
No, that's exactly right. Outlet condition is a big driver. So having that ditch, in Isaac's case, opens up a lot of opportunities. But in regards to like the tile design for a drainage water management system, one of the big things that I would focus on in that case is what's your drainage coefficient going to be on the design system. If you have a good outlet and you can go up to a half-inch drainage coefficient or maybe even more, depending on what you're growing and if you have surface water or whatnot, increase that drainage coefficient, which is going to be a function of depth and spacing on the tile system, obviously. And so I would a lot of times, so like if we're going into a retrofit situation, I'm sure a lot of us have heard of that old kind of 3/8 drainage coefficient traditional target for these systems. If you have the opportunity to upsize or maybe retrofit a main or a sub main in a system like that, it's going to go a long way in terms of being able to manage water during those peak flow periods where you, like Isaac said, you really need to get water off. And so, yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks for those answers. Looks like we only have one more from the chat from Luke. Are there any published studies with this data?
There's no published studies on our end anyway. It's just usually not an avenue that we actually pursue, or when we set them up, we're geared more toward the farmers rather than the published academic studies. But so there wouldn't be on our end just because that's not an avenue that we're necessarily pursuing.
Thanks, Isaac. Are you familiar with any researchers in Illinois that are doing similar studies?
I mean, I'm familiar with some at the university level. Ben probably has worked with a lot of different retailers like us that are doing studies on that.
Yeah, I know Richard Cook and Laura Christensen have done prior research in Illinois, and they have a really good body of work on not just drainage water management, but also the other practices. Prior to my time at ESE, I was at Purdue as part of the Transforming Drainage Project. And so that website's transformingdrainage.org. That was a Midwest regional project among the land grant universities to where we really tried to bring together a lot of research on practices that store water in the landscape, one of those being drainage water management. And so there have been some papers that came out of that project. They should be accessible on the website there that have looked at things like, across the Midwest, not just in Illinois, but Iowa, Indiana, Ohio, all these other states, Minnesota, what's been kind of the performance from a water quality standpoint, but also from a standpoint, in particular for drainage water management. Obviously, on those synthesis studies, you're dealing with a lot of variability. And so it becomes, you have to look at those results with that in mind. That's really important context, but you do see in certain conditions, right? Certain years, you have the management that lines are up right, and you can really hit a home run in terms of these yield responses. But also, to kind of what's been talked about here a little bit already, you have to you have to be mindful. Management, the fact that you put a tile gate or a control structure on the end of the pipe doesn't create impact, right? The management of that gate is what creates the impact, and that's where the magic is made. And so there can certainly be times to where you can hold too much water back, or you can negatively impact a crop. And so that's where automation, I think, is really starting to open up some new doors. And I was really interested here in Isaac's stuff, and particularly in the combination of soil moisture sensors with these automated systems, because it's important to understand that we can record level inside that structure, and that responds obviously to rain hitting the tile system and not, but that's not necessarily the same as water table in the field. There is a lag effect, right? It takes water time to soak into the profile for that water table to raise in between tile lines. And so you can see water level in the box, but we also have to be thinking about what's that relationship for any given soil type to the water table response. And that's what's going to dictate how long do you wait to hold it, how long do you open it up, so on and so forth. And so approaching it almost from that irrigation sense, incorporating soil moisture sensors or water table observation wells or something like that, it adds a whole new capability to these automated systems that I think is really interesting. And I think, Isaac, you guys are seeing. So that was a
Great.
long response. Sorry.
It was interesting. Okay, Ken threw in another question. Are these programs that you shared, Ben, this incentive program, available outside of the counties you've listed on your sheet?
Um, Short answer, no. Unfortunately, no. And so our pot of money right now is in that 7 county focus area. Now, I know there are other efforts going on in Illinois, obviously, between various organizations. And there's always the NRCS programs. And we've worked through those traditional EQIP programs before in Illinois. And so that's certainly an opportunity. So I will say, if there are folks outside of that 7 county area that are still interested in doing a project, by all means, reach out all the same, and we will try to find a right fit for you, and can see where it goes from there. So
Great. If anyone wants to come off of mute, they're welcome to ask any more questions. I think I have one for you all, but I'll give people a moment.
I have one for Isaac.
Go ahead, Ben.
Isaac, do you see? Well, I should step back. Do you change? Does your management change for soybeans versus corn, or do you see opportunity for changing it for soybeans versus corn?
So our management style typically does not. We can be a little more aggressive with how long we hold back, because we're not as worried about backing water up into the root systems being shallower. Um, but in reality, in most years for us, when we get into mid-June, July, um, we have very few times where we're holding water back in excess. So it's got to be a wet year. So in those it will probably change, but the rest of them we're trying to hold back everything we can and get it to reabsorb. But in soybeans we could be more aggressive in what we hold back if we had excess water.
Great. Well, my question for you, Isaac, and maybe Ben, you can throw something in there. Hearing your presentation, I felt like maybe conservation drainage is a bit of a misnomer, and maybe we're shooting ourselves in the foot by looping this practice into a conservation corner. And to me, it's sounding like it's a soil moisture technology. And maybe why isn't this getting promoted as something whenever someone's putting a new tile in their field? Add on this new technology that's helping keep soil moisture in your field. And maybe it's a new kind of management that you have to add on, but you'll see all these extra benefits. with your crop and with your land management. So just throwing that out there. Maybe we want to call this something else so we're not getting pigeonholed.
Well, I think with the automated systems, I think they have it adequately termed the smart drainage system. So, you can put in your drainage in your field, but if you want to improve it, ultimately, I think that's what conservation, reduction of nutrients leaving is great, but I think pushing it as a smart drainage system. So it's an add-on to your drainage system that's going to make it perform better. And that would, I think that'd be insanely sellable with our tile contractors if they weren't so covered up with everything that they had to do. I think they could sell them left and right in that regard.
Ben, any thoughts?
I was trying to come off mute. Yeah, I mean, I think in drainage water management's case, it's been called a lot of different things, right? Drainage water management or controlled drainage or whatever. I think those are either one's reflective of what it does. I think the fact that we kind of loop it into this bucket of conservation drainage, or that kind of general toolbox of multiple practices, that's a function of, that's what originally, when this was researched, that was the purpose, right? The yield stuff came after that, and was kind of seen as an add-on. But to Isaac's point, I mean, the more that we integrate kind of technology and are able to kind of adapt these and move these into modern drainage systems and modern cropping systems, the more that starts to open doors. And in my mind, it becomes more of like this irrigation mindset of where it's not just drainage, it's water management as a whole. How do I manage the water on my farm, whether it's from rainfall or not? So that's kind of where I see some of this going.
Great, awesome. Frank gave us another question. Do you have any estimates for what this system costs?
Yeah, I'm assuming the automated systems are of the most interest, but I'll start with the manual systems. So a standard water control structure is going to be so take these numbers with a grain of salt because it depends on the height of the box and the size of the pipe. But I'll say the manual systems are a couple $1,000s. The automated systems are going to be somewhere in that $9,000, $10,000 area. And that what the automation is, so I should probably add a little bit of context behind that. The automated systems have a valve in the bottom of the box that's hooked up to a linear actuator. So inside that white box that you see on this picture here, there's a controller that's controlling that actuator and telling it when to open and close. And so it just retracts or pushes forward to open or close that valve gate in the bottom of the box. It's got onboard solar, so there's a battery inside that white enclosure. It operates off a cellular network and reads on a 10-minute. And so you're getting readings every 10 minutes from within inside that box. The level readings are done with a radar level sensor. And so their radar sensors are really accurate. They don't drift. They're not temperature sensitive. So it's a really good solution in that regard. Some of our early sensors were using ultrasonics or pressure transducers or something like that, but the radars are kind of where we settled. And so that whole package is what comes with the automated system. Now, obviously, with it running cellular, there's a data plan. And so that's $300 per structure per year on top of the cost of the. And so that's kind of the range of pricing you see. Now, I will say too, AgriDrain is developing kind of mid-range boxes that would fall somewhere in the middle of that range, right? Between 2 and 10, depending on what level of automation you need. There's some options to run like local Wi-Fi controllers rather than cellular. So that drops the $300 data fee off. And you can connect to it with your phone if you're within 100 feet or so. There's also some local Bluetooth options now. And so those reduce some of the technology costs, but you're also compromising accessibility. You don't have the remote access necessarily through the website on 10-minute interval.
All right, great. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I think I'm supposed to pass it to some of the lead organizers here.
Yep, I'll take
But
it from you, MJ.
okay, great.
No, gentlemen, we appreciate that, and I'll just take a moment to opine just a little bit on some of what was presented here today. I think this is sort of a natural progression of managing drainage water. I think you both hit on that it's more of about soil moisture management than it is just drainage, as it has historically been, mostly about just getting the water out of the field. And it's becoming more and more about a management issue of how can I manage my moisture better and take advantage of all the rainfall that we get? Because we all know that we get those dry spells, mid to late season. Seems like every year we have those mid to late season dry spells, and being able to manage the rain that we do get is becoming more and more important. So I think as everything else has gone in agriculture, we're applying technology more and more to everything that we do, and I think this is just the natural progression for our drain tiles, and it's obviously providing some economic benefit when applied in the right scenarios and in the right ways. So I think this is something I think we're going to have more and more farmers interested in as time goes on. So appreciate you both being here today and giving us this presentation. Very, very interesting. I found it quite enlightening, so appreciate that. Thank you, Rachel. Right on cue. So, we want to just remind everybody to keep growing the network. Please feel free to share and follow us on all of our social medias, our LinkedIn, our Facebook. As I mentioned earlier, we're on YouTube. These icon calls are recorded, and we will post them on YouTube. So feel free to share those among your networks. And we also have a newsletter, so we appreciate you taking the opportunity to sign up for our newsletter, and we try to share out as much information as we can. Next up, we just want to share a little bit of our news around the network, some of the events that are coming up here. Looks like we have quite a bit in the next week or so. Several virtual events and some in person. So I won't go through all of these, but if anybody has anything about any of the events that we have listed here that you'd like to share more on, or if there are other events that you would like to highlight, please feel free to do so. I'll be quiet for just a moment and allow anybody who's got anything they want to add to speak up. All right. If not, I think we will move on. So next month, on December 12th, we're going to have another icon call about communicating edge of field practices to farmers and landowners. That will be on December 12th at 10 a.m. Central Time. So please feel free to join us again next month. And I think we can go ahead and launch our exit poll. I know how I'm going to answer. My knowledge was significantly increased. Ah, good catch. Next month's call will be at 9 a.m. as usual, not 10 a.m. Apologies for the typo. Yes, December 10th. December 10th, 9 a.m. And here's our CEU slide. So any CCAs on the call, if you are using the app, please feel free to scan the QR code to receive your CEUs. If you do not have the app, please reach out to Rachel. Her email is listed there with your information, and she'll see to it that your CEUs are submitted. And I believe that's all we have. So I just want to thank everybody again for joining us. Ben, Isaac, thank you for your presentation. Wonderful job. Maybe we'll have you back in the future. This was a good topic. I enjoyed listening to it. So yeah, appreciate that. So look forward to seeing everybody again next month. Thank you for your time, and everybody have a good rest of your week. Thank you.
Thanks.